Hello, and welcome to another Malazan Book of the Fallen video. This time we're getting into one of the funnest parts, which is the Siege of Pale. This is one of the most epic and kind of iconic scene-setting pieces of any fantasy series that I've ever read, so I'm excited to get into it with you. Let's go. Alright, so when we left off with Janos Peron last time around, he had just been kind of taken under wing by Adjunct Lorne, and so now he's making his way back to Unta, which is the Imperial capital now. He's met on the road by a Claw, who we learn is Topper, who's the head of the Claw, and they have this kind of whole hilarious series of interactions where basically Janos has no respect for the Claw. Topper, obviously, is kind of expecting the respect from just a soldier in the army, and so they have this whole kind of dynamic where they're battling, and that's pretty hilarious. But the important point is that Topper takes him through the Imperial Warren to the capital, and this is kind of our first introduction to the magic system, aside from that kind of massacre that we saw down in Iko Khan, where they're basically able to cross like entire continents and oceans over the course of just a matter of what seems like hours to them, and pop out in a new location. So first taste of the magic in the Malazan world, and pretty cool. And I want to just read this because there was a really good quote in one of Tatter Sail's chapters that I think really does a good job of explaining how the magic in the Malazan world actually works. So it says that the warrens of magic dwelt in the beyond. Find the gate and nudge it open a crack. What leaks out is yours to shape. But these are really, as I mentioned in the earlier videos, and you can check those out if you want. The warrens are basically these other realms, other dimensions, and these mages here in the Malazan world are able to kind of access those other areas and use the power to create the magic that you have right here in our own world. So kind of trippy, but very cool, and I think that quote does a great job of explaining it. But so they take that warren, then one of the warrens, the Imperial Warren, which we find out is kind of uninhabited or unclaimed at this point in time, to be able to get to Unta. Pretty hilarious. They cross out of the warren. Peron comes through on his horse and totally bowls over Topper, who's like all bitter, but the Empress, who's actually, they come out like in her audience chamber essentially, and he like knocks down the top claws. Super funny, and kind of makes a self-deprecating joke. It was just like classic Peron the whole time. But then he goes to Lorne. She's found out where this girl, from the Fisher villages, and sends Peron after her. She's embedded with the bridge burners out on the Genebacchus campaign, and so that's where Peron is heading. So then we pick up in Pale with Tatter Sail, and it's actually in the aftermath of the siege, and she's basically standing on one of these hilltops that she was fighting from, like surrounded by basically carnage and gore. It's like all body pieces and like liquefied humans. So it's basically the aftermath of just like a ridiculously gnarly battle that had just taken place. So this is the first time we get a chance to see Tatter Sail, who's like a total badass. I do think it's cool that she's like a woman. She's also described later, I forget the exact term that they use to describe her, but nobody bats an eye that she's like the leader of the mage cadre, or the Empress either, is like never a thing or question about whether they were, male or female, or like, wow, how did a woman get this? It seems very much like a merit-based society, which is kind of cool, or at least merit in the sense that your schemes work out. It's not always the best, most noble, people who do right that get the power, but it is the ones whose schemes work out the best and who have foresight and planning and execute and get people to follow them, etc. And there's no real like gender issues, I feel like, in the Malazan world. And you actually see this throughout the whole rest of the series, right? There's like all these leaders who rise to very high ranking positions in whatever faction they're with, and whether they were like a man or a woman was never really a thing. That's just an aside, but just something I really love about the series, that it's just like, it's like, who's the biggest G who can lead this group? So that's kind of cool. But so basically she's standing on this hilltop looking around at all this carnage, And that's actually, the one of the pictures I use in my intro is like that Siege of Pale, where they're just like firing down from Moonspawn onto these hilltops, and it's a pretty gnarly looking battle. This is also where we see the Morass for the first time. So this is like a group of allies that are fighting with the Malazan Empire, and they wear like this armor that makes them look like bugs. Nobody knows if they're human or not. They have their own like language with all these clicking and different noises and stuff like that. But they're going in after the battle's over for their hour of blood, and they basically go in and kill and loot and do whatever they want for an hour, and that's an agreement they have with the Empress to continue to serve with them. Tatter Sail doesn't really like that. She's like, dude, haven't we killed enough people here? But that definitely goes down, but I think it just kind of starts to show how even amongst the allies, like, they're questioning each other, and even though they're all fighting on one side, they're not really happy about it, not really too friendly with each other. As she's standing there just kind of like in shock or whatever, she glances over and this guy starts talking, and we see Hairlock, who's another high mage in the Malazan military, and he's basically been wrecked, right, by this battle. He's been ripped in half, his like guts are everywhere, but he actually seems pretty chill, and he's like just talking to her in a fairly chill manner. But that's our first introduction to Hairlock, who's a pretty gnarly dude. There's like a lot of back and forth and just like character building with those two characters in there. But basically, she tells him that she always hated him, but always respected him too for his power, for his courage. And he obviously laid his life on the line there in that battle. Hairlock makes a bunch of smart ass comments and also starts planting the seeds that like he thinks Tayshren did this to them, and so that they've been kind of double crossed by their own high mage, like the head of all of the mages for the entire Malazan Empire. And so that's kind of, where we start to see even more distrust building, and we actually flash back to before the battle where Tatter Sail's like in bed with one of her underlings, Khallet, who's also a high mage for the military. They go to this meeting at Dujek One Arm's tent, and he's the overall military commander, known as a High Fist, and he's in control of all the forces, at least the ones on Genebacus at that time. He basically tells them that there's two things that have happened. One is that a claw has been sent, and remember that's the Empress's kind of group of assassins / covert operatives, and so that gets everybody kind of on edge, going, what's the plan? Are we about to be backstabbed? And also that they're going to take on Moonspawn, which is this big kind of floating pyramid city which is settled over Pale, and that's one of the main reasons why they haven't been able to take it up to this point. It's been like a 3 or 4 year siege by this point, but that they're going for it today. And so that sparks off all this kind of discussion about who is that person in Moonspawn. They, come to find out that it's a man named Animander Rake, who's the head of the Tistandi, basically just, ridiculously badass figure who everybody knows about through like myth and legend, thousands of years old, hundreds of thousands even potentially, and just renowned for obviously crazy strength. And basically, you do not want to with this guy is the moral of the story. While they're arguing and things like that, you find out that even the Talon Imas, who's another group that I mentioned in one of the earlier videos, which again you can check out up there, won't even go up there, and they can like turn themselves to dust and have crazy magic and travel on the wind and all that stuff, and even they won't go up there and tangle with Animander Rake. So that pretty much tells you something right there. And so everybody's scared, including Dujek. He even gets like a little bit of a hint that he's about to be double crossed. That is kind of all of the events that lead up to it, where everyone's basically second guessing what the motives are. Can they really do this? Are they being set up? There's kind of all the infighting that gets established with Hairlock kind of planting the seeds about being double crossed, Tayshren not knowing what he's doing. To be fair, Tayshren does not help his case at all by being like super overconfident, smug, dismissive. So, I think that all just kind of adds to this vibe of like, yes, we're out here fighting a war, but we're also like fighting each other at the same time. So just pretty much the worst case scenario that you want headed into a major battle. Then we fast forward to the actual battle of Pale itself. And so you got all the high mages out there like arrayed on these little hilltops. I think there was like 4 or 5 hilltops that they're stretched out across. Taishran does put himself on the number 1 hilltop, so the most direct like line of fire, and Tatter Sail definitely gives him props for that. But they basically, initiate an attack, and they start sending up like balls of flame and whatnot, and crazy magic up there, and like blowing huge chunks off the side of this flying fortress, basically. Yeah, does not go so well, because Animander Rake basically walks out on a ledge and just completely up. He sends down like ridiculous waves of magic, and it basically just obliterates everybody who can't like fend that off with other types of magic. And so the entire army that's like behind these mages basically gets just lit up. That's where you got all that carnage kind of before we went back in time and rewound to the events leading up to the major battle. But all of her mage cadre has been wiped out, and a bunch of the other high mages, including Hairlock, as we saw earlier, were wiped out. But it was also, a giant demon like leaps up out of the ground and basically kills Nightchill, which was one of the other high mages that got sent to the battle. Acherones also gets demolished by like ice, so he gets frozen and then crushed and turned to dust. So a lot of their own side, even the high mages, get wiped out, including Animander Rake also sends out these great ravens, which are pretty gnarly. They weren't that consequential in the battle overall, but they're like these gigantic white ravens that are pretty epic, and we'll see more of those guys later on. But he had like 30,000 of them inside of his flying fortress. But basically, she's looking around and kind of comes to the conclusion that, the wounds that both Hairlock and Callet took were both coming from their own side. So that couldn't have been Animander Rake who was attacking them. That was somebody on their own team, and she basically comes to the conclusion that Taishran has basically sabotaged or betrayed them all, and she's pissed. So then she links up with the bridge burners, who come over and tell her that they're also very suspicious of Taishran. So they were given the job during the Siege of Pale of trying to tunnel under the massive walls. And so they've been underground for 3 years, basically trying to dig these holes to be able to invade the city or give them another path. And so when they had this huge, mage battle out there with Animander Rake, all of those tunnels under Pale collapsed. The vast majority of the bridge burners died down there. There's like 40 or so left. But they come up to this mound where Tatter Sail's at, because basically we find out that they made a deal before the battle with Hairlock to come and save his life in exchange for basically kind of understanding or uncovering who double-crossed them, why, and how high up it really goes. So they show up, and we meet Whiskey Jack again. He comes with Quick Ben, who's this gnarly mage, and actually one that Tatter Sail's like, how do I not know who this guy is? Because he's like so gnarly powerful. And then also Callum, who is like the Bridge Burner's main assassin, and he's just like this giant, muscular, beastly dude who like moves like a ballet dancer at the same time, and so basically can just like kill anybody whenever he wants. They come over to work out their deal with Hairlock, and basically they, have a ton of conversation and all this back and forth about who not to trust and whether Taishran ultimately is behind it. But when it comes down to it, they basically take the soul of Hairlock, and Quick Ben is able to like transfer that into the body of this like little wooden like marionette. I think they said it was like down to his chest, so it's like 2 foot tall little like marionette that you would use in like drawing class or something like that. And they basically turn him loose into the Warrens to try and find out who betrayed him, and do it on the sneak, kind of in these magical pathways, to hopefully find out, is it just Taishran like trying to take power for himself? Is this coming from the Empress themselves? And ultimately Tatter Sail decides that she's going to get on board with the bridge burners because she agrees that something, is fishy and isn't right, and so she's going to help them figure things out. And so that pretty much is where we're going to leave it for the Battle of Pale. We're going to pick up next episode with a discussion of the kind of aftermath of the Battle of Pale, because this is really just the spark that starts all the kindling that really gets the whole rest of the series going. And so super gnarly battle. I'm sure I missed some critical points. Let me know down in the comments what's your favorite part of the Battle of Pale or the Siege of Pale. what do you think is all going on, right? Because who ultimately betrayed the bridge burners? I want to get some conversation going, because we know obviously as you get to the end of the books what happened, but there's still a lot of kind of nebulous things about who was behind what. I know that we ultimately come to find out who was behind the friendly fire and all of that, and there's a lot to untangle there, but that's basically the synopsis of what goes down through the siege and into the end of the battle. So thank you so much for watching. I'm already learning a lot. I changed my pronunciation because I got some comments saying, dude, you're bottling the pronunciation. It's Malazan, not Malazan. So apologies there, but that's exactly what I was hoping to get out of this channel, is to learn more. And I've had some great comments and just a lot of cool conversations going. So super fun. I'm really enjoying it. I hope you are too. Give this video a like so YouTube will promote it out there and we get even more folks into the conversation. Click subscribe and turn on those notifications so that you never miss a new video. And until then, happy reading.